Mr. Greenblatt, as allegations of politicization of CIGIE continue, I am concerned about whether appropriate standards of due process are in place to ensure that IGs and employees of IG offices are not unfairly targeted for just doing their jobs. CIGIE's Integrity Committee, or IC, investigates wrongdoing by IGs or their staff. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it Kimberly A. Howell who is currently the chair of the IC?
Correct.
And Kimberly Howell is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
She is an IG of what's called a designated federal entity.
I get that. She is not an employee of the federal government, is she?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Can the president or anyone in the executive branch fire Ms. Howell or any head of the IC?
The president could remove could remove the head of the CBP, where she is the inspector general.
Okay, but the president does not interact with or fire the head of the IC, correct? Well, and you've already testified that you don't have any oversight, and you do not oversee Ms. Howell. Isn't that also correct?
I can remove them from the Integrity Committee.
Okay. Well, just over a month ago, the IC delivered a report to the President and Congress with findings of abuse of authority regarding the Social Security Administration's Inspector General. And Ms. Howell sent and signed this report to its recipients. Were you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
And an IC report delivered to the president or an agency head then can recommend or result in disciplinary action against an IG or a person working inside an IG office, leading all the way up to termination. Is that correct?
It can recommend that, yes.
Okay, and doesn't that mean that the leadership of CIGIE could use the IC to undo the presidential appointment and Senate confirmation of executive officials by individuals that were never nominated and which are actually not even federal employees?
No, I don't agree with that statement at all.
Okay. When the IC asks an IG or an employee of an IG office to respond to an allegation to avoid a full investigation, the respondent must fully refute the allegation such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. In other words, when they come under investigation, they are the ones that carry the burden of proof with a very high standard for exoneration. Why is this different than American civil and criminal proceedings where the burden of proof is on the accusing party rather than on the accused?
No, that's not a fair representation of what happens in an investigation.
Then explain it to me.
So when a complaint comes in and the Integrity Committee determines that it is opening a case, it generally refers the complaint to the subject or subjects plural and says, here are the allegations.
Refute them.
You have an opportunity to refute them.
And the burden of proof is that they have to prove that the allegation is such that no reasonable person would conclude that further development would demonstrate that the respondent committed the misconduct. Isn't that the standard?
I believe that sounds accurate, but the whole point is that it doesn't, the Integrity Committee wouldn't have to do that step at all. That's a courtesy. That's an extra step.
I would tend to disagree with that, representation.
You can disagree, but that's an extra step that they add to help the subjects. So it's not
placing the burden of proof on them.
It's being perverted. This is like looking through a funhouse mirror. This is not an accurate portrayal of what's actually happening in the process. This is an opportunity for the subjects, and the Integrity Committee over and over again takes those responses.
So in other words, what you're saying...
Let me finish my answer. Kills complaints and doesn't get to investigations.
Excuse me?
I'm trying to finish my answer.
I'm going to reclaim my time and ask the questions.
Our witness needs to understand that the gentlewoman controls the time, and I do recognize that you would like the opportunity to respond accordingly. I'm sure that the gentlewoman would give you that opportunity. She controls the time, and I would remind the witness we appreciate him being here, but this is a hearing that the members that are waived on will control their own time, sir. Does the gentleman understand that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Let's move on to a different subject here then. When the IC pursues an investigation against an IG or an employee of the IG office, it does so against them in their personal capacity. Is that correct? even though the allegations relate to official acts?
It is investigating the individual as opposed to the organization.
So it is against them in their personal capacity, correct?
It is not investigating them in their personal capacity, like if it were, say, a driving incident.
Well, let me ask it
related
this
to their
way.
work.
Are they able to access agency documentation that may support their claim of innocence?
I would imagine so.
Do you know one way or the other?
No, but I would imagine they can get materials in their work environment.
In its policies and procedures, the IC states that it may, quote, consider wrongdoing alleged to have occurred while an individual served as a covered person, even if that individual is no longer a covered person or in government service when the IC receives the allegation, end quote. Is the authority to investigate federal employees who are no longer in IG service or retired persons derived from statute, or is that an internal rule?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. If current IGs and IG employees find it difficult to meet the IC standard, how could it be even remotely possible for a former employee to resolve allegations against them, especially if they're not able to access documents from the agency?
As part of the investigation, I would imagine that the Integrity Committee would go to the agency, the OIG in question, to get relevant materials.
But the individual wouldn't have access to that information.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I would say that IGs regularly go after investigations involving former employees, because otherwise you set up a situation where folks will just resign and escape accountability, which is an outcome that none of us would want.
I think what we've uncovered is that there are very serious due process problems and constitutional and statutory problems associated with the ICs and the way that CIGIE is set up and operated. That's the purpose of this hearing, is to get to the bottom of that. That's why I waved onto this committee, because I have very serious concerns about the due process rights and the process that is being followed. So we will follow up with this potentially with additional questions, but we will also continue to work with this committee to make sure that we can protect the due process rights and the rights of the people being investigated. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.